Tiebreaker Tuesday. Everybody take a deep breath with me. Please keep your hands and feet in the vehicle and stay seated at all times for whatever this is about to be. Bear with me. Here it is. The situation between Seattle and St. Louis, who will both win, who will both be 7-3, which means they will be deadlocked in the first 4 tiebreakers. If that happens. I know we're going to get to the 4th tiebreaker and how this is all going to play together. But if they both win, which we both expect them to win, I have here St. Louis is an 8-point favorite against Orlando. Seattle, 8.5-point favorite against Vegas. We expect them both to win. Actually, we've been expecting them both to be 7-3 for quite a while now. So, I read the tiebreaker from the XFL, officially, the situation. And many of you were tweeting it out and talking about it. First of all, ESPN did not necessarily have it right. What came from the league was correct, and they followed up and they corrected it. Now, there's more to what the league told you, which is that St. Louis needs to score 20 more points than Seattle this weekend. So if Seattle scored 20 against Vegas, St. Louis would have to score 40. That's what they're telling you. They're also telling you that St. Louis would have to remain number 1 in the XFL North in points against, which they currently are not. They're currently number 2. So that was also a little weird to me, how that read. Maybe they were trying to say they have to get into first. We're going to break it down for you. Here's what I got, and we're going to give you examples in a second here. It's a combo of tiebreaker 4 and tiebreaker 5 that can get the St. Louis Battlehawks in the playoffs when both teams are 7-3. Hear me out. Sunday rooting guide for the Battlehawks. And obviously you have to win Saturday. You need to remember the number of points the Orlando Guardians score against the St. Louis Battlehawks. That is the single most important thing this weekend. It matters none how many points St. Louis scores, how many points Seattle scores. St. Louis is too far back. You cannot be 20 points behind the number 1 offense and expect that's a realistic path to get into the playoffs. No, there's another way. And it's how much Orlando scores. St. Louis has to clamp down on defense. I saw Trey Watson, the linebacker for the Battlehawks, quote tweet us, and he's like, oh, I want to see this. Yes, the defense must play well. You take that number of points that the Orlando Guardians score, and at this point, Zook, we're just going to show them an example of what it could potentially be.
Before we get there,
yeah,
talk about the points for versus points against.
Right.
And how that
if
works.
People don't get that, right.
Because
so maybe I'm skipping
It's a little confusing.
So here's maybe what I'm skipping if you don't know, which this is part of the actual language in the XFL tiebreaker 4 and 5. In tiebreaker 4, it is your combined ranking within the division in your points for versus points against for all 9 games or all 10 games next week. So what that means is they take your points for ranking, which for Seattle currently in the division is 2. They're behind DC. They take your points against ranking, which currently for Seattle is number 1 in the division. 2 + 1 is 3. That we can do, right? Simple enough. Seattle's combined ranking in the division would be 3. Okay? Here's the issue. In points for, in that world, St. Louis is too far back from Seattle. They are 20 points back. Okay? It's too many points to make up. They've got to do their work in points against. So how does this work? Does that answer your question, Zook, by the way? I think the combined ranking thing is a little unclear to some, but I think that's it's your points for rank plus your points against rank.
Right.
In one tiebreaker, it's just the division. In the next tiebreaker, it's the whole league, 1 through 8.
Yeah, I think that's a little clearer.
Okay. So we'll pull up the example and let's walk you through how this can potentially work for St. Louis and Seattle, because they are going to both finish 7-3. And a lot of you are going to be sitting around thinking, well, who's going to make the playoffs? Well, we have what we think is a decent example for you. So again, single most important thing for St. Louis in their game on Saturday is not how many points they score. It's how many points Orlando scores. They have got to limit Orlando defensively. Take care of business. I'm going to guess and say 15 points is what the Guardians are able to put up against St. Louis. Could be more, could be less. Doesn't really matter, right? We're just plugging 15 into the formula. Does not have to be a certain number or less. This is just for the example. So that happened Saturday. If you're a Battlehawks fan, this is your rooting guide on Sunday. Take care of business against Orlando. Have them score as little points as possible. On Sunday, the Houston-Arlington game is just as important as the Vegas-Seattle game, believe it or not. And the Houston-Arlington game is before the Vegas-Seattle game. You might ask, how does that work? Why does an XFL South game matter? Well, because in tiebreaker 5, you rank teams 1 through 8 in points for and points against. And it just so happens the Houston Roughnecks and Arlington Renegades are within 1, 2, or 3 points of each of the teams in our scenario. So yes, it does matter. On Sunday, if you're a St. Louis Battlehawks fan, you need the following. Houston needs to score 6 more points, at least, than Orlando. So in this scenario, we have Orlando at 15. Plug in any number you want, add 6 points. In this scenario, we have 22. If it's 6 points or more, that checks 1 box. We're on to the next box. Arlington needs to score 2 more points than Orlando. So take your Orlando points, add 2. We have 21, checks the box. Then we move on to the nightcap, which a lot of people are thinking is the end-all be-all. Well, you still have to have some things happen in the Houston game. Obviously, if Seattle loses this game and St. Louis wins, it's obvious. We don't have to talk about that. We're talking about both teams winning and going 7-3, and what do they have to score? Vegas needs to score 7 more points than Orlando. Take your Orlando points, 15, add 7 or more, bang. In this scenario, Vegas scores 28. That's 7 more than 15. You check the box. Problem is, there's 2 more boxes still for St. Louis. Vegas also needs to score 6 more points than Houston. Take your 15, add 6. You're there. Just barely, but you're there.
So
go ahead, jump in. I got one more quick. Let me finish up.
Sure.
And 2 more points than Arlington.
Okay.
So take your 21, add 2. You're there with 28.
So I want you to explain to me why we're talking about the 5th tiebreaker now instead of talking about the 4th tiebreaker.
Right. It's an important question. The XFL has addressed the 4th tiebreaker. In the 4th tiebreaker, the reason they are talking about St. Louis scoring 20 more than Seattle and that being the end-all be-all is because they're not necessarily looking at the 5th tiebreaker. They are ignoring the fact that the 4th tiebreaker can also be a tie, just like the first 3. How would that be, do you ask? Well, like I just said, if the Vegas Vipers score 7 more points against Seattle than the Orlando Guardians do against St. Louis, guess what happens? St. Louis leapfrogs Seattle in points against for the division, putting them at number 1 in the division and Seattle at number 2. Flip to points for. Seattle number 2, St. Louis number 3. Let's do some math. 3 points for St. Louis, 1 points against St. Louis. 4 for Seattle, 2 plus 2, also 4. 4th tiebreaker, knotted up by 7 points. Is it unrealistic to think that Vegas can outscore Orlando by 7 points. Of course they can. It's a better offense from what I've seen. So they're ignoring that. I think this is going to get decided in the 5th tiebreaker. Now, to even answer more of your question, we don't want to be in a situation where we rely on the 4th tiebreaker and then we're all sitting around after the Vegas-Seattle game on Sunday night thinking, okay, now we got to go back because we didn't realize Houston and Arlington mattered. Maybe I'm the first one to tell you Houston and Arlington matters in the 5th tiebreaker. Of course, if Vegas and Orlando are within 4, 5, 6 points of each other, anything less than 7, we have a scenario here that happens in. And look, Seattle gets in on the 4th tiebreaker. But if you're a St. Louis fan, you don't want to hear that. You want to hear, how am I going to get into the playoffs? And maybe some players and coaches need to hear this as well. How am I going to get in the playoffs if we don't score 20 more than Seattle, which just seems unrealistic? Well, there's a way. 5th tiebreaker, 1 through 8, not 1 through 4, right? So now we're dealing with bigger numbers. In the scenario we have in gray, St. Louis finishes the season 2nd in points against. They finish the season 4th in points for. 2 + 4 is 6. In this same scenario, Seattle would be 2nd in points for. The problem is they're 5th in points against because they gave up more to Vegas than Houston and Arlington did. So that puts them at 5th. 2 + 5 is 7. St. Louis combined ranking. We're playing golf here. 6 is better than 7 in golf. That's how St. Louis gets in the playoff, guys. So to reiterate, Battlehawks fans, Battlehawks players, coaches, fans of the league, this is a more realistic path for St. Louis to get in. Running through it again. Houston score 6 more than Orlando. Arlington score 2 more than Orlando. Vegas score 7 more than Orlando. Vegas score 6 more than Houston. Vegas score 2 more than Arlington. Those are low numbers, and those are doable. Remember, the Vipers put up 26 against Seattle the first time around. In the other scenarios, we talked about it a lot. In the middle, in orange, the reason Seattle gets in here, look at Orlando's point total, 15. It could be any number, plug any number you want in there. Add 7, 22. Do not get there for Vegas. Therefore, the 5th tiebreaker does not even take into account. You got 21. Seattle's in. The 3rd scenario gets weird. There is a possibility where Vegas can score 7 more points, right, than Orlando. The problem is, in this scenario for St. Louis, who is going to be, by the way, the biggest Rod Woodson, Ray Sherman fans of all time this weekend. In this scenario, Vegas did not do enough to outscore Houston or Arlington, which propped up Seattle's points against and knocked St. Louis out of the playoffs. So, big picture here, you have 3 goals if you're a St. Louis Battlehawks fan this week. Number 1, low points. Allow Orlando to score the lowest point total possible. Get them to 0 if you can. You need to kind of middle the Houston-Arlington game, right? Because you're stuck in a situation where you also need Vegas to outscore Houston by 6 and Arlington by 2. So you don't want those 2 teams to necessarily go off against each other either. You need kind of a 22-21. That's why we use this as the example. I kind of played off the over-under for this game and the spread, which is 1. And lastly, you need Vegas to win, of course, because you want to just knock Seattle out. But if they don't win, which, let's be honest, they probably won't, need them to score some points in a loss. I'm going to say it. 24 Vegas Vipers points gets St. Louis in. Because I don't think Orlando is going to have 20 plus. And I think Houston-Arlington could be a low-scoring, ugly game. So Chris Zook is not quite as comfortable as he once was. Now, Zook, your thoughts on this from a what if standpoint? Is there anything I'm missing that I need to clarify?
I'm not sure.
Because that's a lot.
Yeah, you spun me around a little bit here.
It's tough.
And remember, these...
Watch back, rewind the video.
Right.
You're going to have to.
Remember, the stats or the scores on the screen right now don't really matter.
This is an example.
It's all about the plus minus points.
Plug your number in. Whatever you think it's going to be. It's a simple formula. If you want to rewind the video, this is the formula. Plug any number in to that Orlando score. Does not matter what St. Louis scores, right? Add 7. That's where you need Vegas to be. Add 6. That's where you need Houston to be. Add 2. That's where you need Arlington to be. Do it all over again. Plug in a Vegas number. Does not matter what Seattle scores. You need 6 more than Houston. You need 2 more than Arlington. You need 7 more than Vegas.
So basically, what you're saying is Seattle's defense needs to be the difference to get into the playoffs.
In the most practical fashion, think 24 from Vegas will get St. Louis in the playoffs, and I mean that. Like you cannot mess with that. If you're at 24-25, which is just playing off of what they gave up last time around, right? Which I'm not saying the defense is as bad as they were in week 3. But you're playing with fire. If you're going 24, 25, 26, and now all of a sudden you're sitting here thinking, oh man, now we need Houston and Arlington and Orlando to take care of business, and they're not good offenses by any means. So St. Louis fans, a little more hope than you hopefully had going into this show. And there is a scenario that we could go to a 6th tiebreaker. I'm not going to tell you how. I'm just going to tell you if we get to the 6th tiebreaker, the Seattle Sea Dragons are in, because it's net points, which that's what should be number 4 and 5. But net points is number 6, and Seattle is there easily. And number 7 is a coin toss.
No, number 8's a coin toss. I'm not sure what 7 is.
Number 7 is me and you just fist fight.
Seattle wins, baby. Let's go.
So that is the disaster that is the XFL North tiebreaker.